This Tim Albright with AVNation with an AVNation special, taking a look at the new Extron XPA Ultra FX Series. And with me to talk about that is Kevin McGinniss from Extron. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Tim. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. So let's kind of get into this for a second. First, anytime there's a new upgrade or new type of addition to a series, the first question is what's the difference, right? We're familiar with XPA, so what are the differences when it comes to the new FX series compared to the rest of the XPA line?
So with the XPA FX series, we took everything we learned with the XPA Ultra half racks that came out in 2018, and we increased the power on those units. So we went from a half rack enclosure to a full rack enclosure. We were able to go from now 200 watts up to 800 watts when you do a flexible output on that device. It is now a fan-cooled device, where a lot of our other half-racks devices were convection-cooled. And we give you the ability to have the configurable outputs per channel. On some of the models, it would actually combine channels on that. And one of the biggest new features that's been introduced on this is the InstaWake Plus. So when we came out with the XPA half racks back in 2009, we were at 500 milliseconds. And then when the XPA Ultras came out in 2018, we got down to 100 milliseconds. And now with this new XPA Ultra FX series, these full racks, we're able to get that down to less than 5 milliseconds. And everybody asks, well, how quick is that? If you think about 60 frames of video, and that's 16 milliseconds, we're a third of a frame. So it's pretty quick. You're not really going to miss any of that audio with that wake up of the amplifier.
You mentioned the flexible outputs for there a couple different times. Talk about how the configurable outputs actually work.
So on the amplifier, if we talk about the XPA 4004, that's a 4-channel amplifier. Each one of those outputs is individually configured, the impedance. So that means you can set output number 1 to either 4 or 8 ohms. Output number 2 could be set to 70 volt or 100 volt. We give the ability on those to enable or disable that high-pass filter, and it's just a very easy 6-position switch that gives you a visual indication of how it's set up on the device. So it's very flexible and very easy. You don't have to buy a purposely built amplifier with the impedance you need. You can actually make that adjustment out in the field. Makes it kind of quick and easy.
So talk for a second, because here's the thing. It's been a minute since I've designed systems, but if somebody's looking at this going, okay, that sounds like a cool thing, it looks good on a marketing piece. What exactly is the real world use case of a configurable output, though?
When you're doing your design, you don't actually have to think about, I need to go and say, pick this amplifier, and they all need to be low impedance or 8 ohms. Or if you have that gives you that ability just to very easily in the field make that adjustment. Or instead of having to buy 2 amplifiers, you can buy, if you have 2 speakers in the front of the space, you could set her at low impedance running at 8 ohms. You could have those first 2 channels set for 8 ohms, and then channels 3 and 4 are set for high impedance or ceiling speakers for 70 volt or 100 volt. It allows you to get that density within that 1 RU.
So one of the things on the website, you guys talk about sustainability of the FX series quite a lot, actually. And it has been my experience that amplifiers are big, giant energy sucks, right? They take a lot of energy, and they do because they need a lot of energy to push the sound out of the speakers. How exactly is the FX series sustainable?
Well, it's actually a kind of a 3-prong approach. Okay. Start thinking about 1, its efficiency, so consuming less energy. So the overall design of the XPA Ultra and the Ultra FX series that we've come out with, we're trying to save every milliwatt that we can on that device. One of those features that we've introduced into this amplifier is actually the Eco Standby. And what that does, it's an Extron exclusive technology that places the amplifier in standby just 8 seconds after inactivity. So if you think about you're in a space, you're listening to music or having a presentation, and then there's nothing going on after 8 seconds, that amplifier will shut itself down. And at that point, it's only consuming 1 watt of power. But with that InstaWake Plus that we talked about a minute ago, we're now able to very quickly wake that amplifier back up, allowing you to have no audio dropped within that space. What this does is it maximizes the lifetime of the amplifier, 1, because you're not consuming or producing all this heat. 2, you as the user, you think about it, you're not generating all this extra heat that's coming out of this amplifier. Because a lot of amplifiers today, if they have a standby mode, it takes about 25 minutes before they'll go to sleep. With this feature, we're going to go to sleep after 8 seconds of no audio, consuming less than 1 watt. Your utility bill goes down. At the same time, your HVAC bill would actually be less than that space. And the other part that adds up to all of this is that the cooler you run devices, the longer they actually last. So you're not buying more equipment. From a sustainability perspective, you're saving energy. At the same time, you're not having to put additional products into the landfill or buy new equipment over and over.
Kevin, in addition to the channel output types, you guys also have the ability to kind of share power between channels. How does that work?
Yeah, we have our flexible power allocation, which does with any odd even channel pair. So example, channels 1 and 2 or 3 and 4. So if we're talking about, say, the XPA 4004 FX, that's 400 watts per channel. Well, we have the ability to take that 800 watts that's available to those 2 channels and split it up any way. So you could put 600 watts on one channel, 200 watts on channel 2, or put 800 watts on one channel. So an example of this might be if you had the XPA 4004 and you had two of our comm speakers on channels 1 and 2, that's 400 watts at load impedance or 8 ohms, and then you had our subwoofer on channel 3 that could run up to 800 watts. You can combine channels 3 and 4 over there. And if you did an application where you did need an additional ceiling zone with 1 or 4 speakers to cover that fill area, you could put a load impedance channel out there and say 16 watts per speaker times 4, 64 watts. So you have that ability to share and be flexible with power within the device.
You mentioned the fact that after 8 seconds of inactivity, it goes to sleep. It typically, when you turn an amplifier off, there is some sort of noise, right? There's something that comes out of the speakers. What do the people in that area, in that space, listening to those speakers, what do they hear when it goes to sleep?
They hear nothing.
Okay.
It goes to sleep. There's no pop. Even when the amplifier is waking up, there's no pop, squeak, or anything else, and you're getting that full energy. So some of the other amplifiers that are on the market, when they come out of their similar modes like Eco Standby, they'll actually go to a half power than the full power. You're not going to get that full energy. When we say that at that 8 seconds after it goes down and you want it to come back up, that InstaWake Plus technology allows that full power available on that output for the user.
Now, I might get in trouble for asking this, and you might get in trouble for answering it, but we're going to do it anyway. How is there no pop? I mean, here could be again. I've been doing this for a minute. I'm a little old, but is that a Extron secret, or how exactly do you guys achieve that?
It's an engineering has done some work over the years to make sure that they're able to make sure that energy. Their main trick is making sure that energy is always available and ready to go.
Okay.
So that we're not allowing everything to dissipate at that point. It's just it's holding it at that steady state. So it's pretty much it's like putting the water or putting the cup in water and keeping your hand over top of it until you pull your hand out. That energy is not going to get released in that case.
That's
so
fair.
It's a simple visual.
All right, I like it. One of the areas that amplifiers have typically, again, this has been decades, they get a bad rap is heat. One of the nice places to go in the wintertime, at least here around St. Louis, is the rack room because it's always warm. How does the FX series, how do they treat heat differently?
So this is one of our first, we'll start out in front of, for Extron, this is one of our first amps that does have fans built into it. But when we put those fans inside of it, we decided to make certain decisions to, one, help dissipate that heat within the system. So what we did first is we have 2 metal fans, not just one, blowing across the enclosure. What that does is it allows us actually to reduce the fan speed within the system and gently push that air through, which in the same time, less noise. We're also using higher quality metal fans so that they're going to last a lot longer. You're not going to get that whine of those bearings over time.
Yeah.
The next part is it's the overall design of the amplifier. The FETs that are inside of that amplifier. One of the things that we do on Extron side is that with the heat sink that's in there, it's actually oversized on purpose to help dissipate that heat within the unit through that cooling path, where some of the other amplifiers on the market will take and actually mount their FETs to the above or below side of the chassis and sink their heat into the device above you, which then you're not a great neighbor within the rack.
No.
The other part is our whole design and placement of our components within the system. We take and put all those sensitive components like electrolytic capacitors in the cool zone up in the front part to keep them away from the heat that's generated by those amplifiers and those FETs. And one of those design things, if you think about electrolytic capacitors, for every 10 degrees that you lower them, you double the life of the capacitor.
Oh,
and if
wow.
we think about it, in our world, if we can reduce the heat within our products, we can extend the life of the products. There's a lot of consideration put in the system of how can we keep the longevity of this product.
Which actually goes back to your sustainability.
Yeah, and we've been doing that, I mean, since 2009. If you think about one of the early ones, the XPA 2001, a half rack, 7-year, 100 volt, 200 watts per channel, that's been out there since 2009. It's been a workhorse for a lot of people.
Kevin, you mentioned the fact that the way you manage heat, you guys are good neighbors inside of a rack space. What exactly does that mean?
Some of the competitors out there, especially some of their smaller amplifiers, you actually have to leave a rack space above that device to allow heat to be dissipated within the rack. Or so some of these larger power amplifiers, they're actually taking up 2 rack spaces to cover that space to dissipate that heat. And Extron side, with that 1 RU, that's 1600 watts in that 4004, we're able now to stack multiple devices on top of each other without a problem because we are an actively cooled device. So we're not going to overheat the device above us or below us. We're actually a good neighbor in the rack.
That also allows you to put more things in the rack too. You're not I don't know, burning up, to keep using the heat metaphor here. You're not burning up rack spaces because you don't have to put in blanks.
Correct. Rack space we know is at a premium anymore. We've seen some systems where you have a full multi-purpose space that you're squeezing into an 8 RU enclosure inside of a lectern. So anything we can do to reduce the amount of heat that we generate or the space that we need for our device, we try to think about that at Extron. One
of the things that you guys have also done is you've brought your design and building in-house. And I say that one of the things that I have always been fascinated by Extron is for years, and from my understanding is more than 20 years or so, you guys do a lot of designing. You design a lot of your chipsets. You design a lot of your components. For the amplifiers, you brought somebody in that's super smart about energy and power. You guys designed your own power supplies as opposed to buying them from somebody else. What is the importance of Extron bringing those design, bringing that manufacturing, and bringing that building of the FX series in-house?
To be honest, it's reliability if you really want to think about it to start. And if the Extron store, our power supply store, starts back in 2008. If you remember back then, we had a lot of issues with power supplies and problems. Andrew Edwards, the owner of the company, went out and hired a world-renowned power supply engineer. And Eric has, from that point, has always had his design philosophy, has always been performance, reliability, and efficiency, and it wasn't just based on cost. So when we start thinking about our amplifiers and everything else, yes, they're all built in-house. There's no OEMs for the power supplies or those amp modules. Extron Engineering has always had that ability that if we have a problem with components or something goes end of life, they're very easily to adapt and change and make sure that we can keep a shipping product. This has also at the same time allowed us to have a 7-year warranty for our amplifiers and, for our power supplies. If you think about an amplifier, it's really just one big power supply within the system. So,
Kevin, talk for a second as we wrap up here to the folks that are watching this and they're either education, they're in corporate America. Who should need an FX series XPA amplifier?
Anybody, when you start thinking about your applications, where an auditorium or a classroom or even a multi-purpose room, where you have our biggest problem today during our design is this rack space. We've got all this equipment, but we have very limited rack space. So with the flexibility of the FX we have 2 4-channels, either 200 watt or a 400 watt, or there's the 8-channel, which is 200 watts per channel. We give you that flexibility to be able to put these into your systems and allow you to adapt in the field where you don't have to buy a specific low impedance or high impedance amplifier for that application.
All right, very good. Kevin, somebody wants to find out more about the XPA FX series. How do they do that?
Extron.com, and actually if you type in Extron.com and XPA Ultra FX Series, that'll pop up on the website for you.
All right, very good. Kevin McGinniss from Extron. Thank you so much, sir. For AVNation, go by our website, AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv, and find more programs like this and a whole lot more. All that and more at AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This is AVNation.
This is AVNation.